From the Times and the Sunday Times, this is The Story. I'm Manveen Rana. We live in an era when your whole life is on your smartphone. There's an app for everything, from your finances to your health. So most of us, at some point, will have wondered, just how much do the tech companies know about me? It's a question that preoccupied the Sunday Times journalist Matilda Davies until one day she decided to find out.
On March the 14th, 2022, I had set my alarm for 7:15, as I usually do, snoozed it again at 7:30. Then, once I'd woken up, I opened my pharmacy app to check on a medication, and then I checked my bank balance at about 2:30 that afternoon, and then I bought a birthday card for my father at 4:00. I probably wouldn't have remembered all this, but I know it because Facebook recorded it.
The question really is why? With 70% of us in the UK using a platform owned by Meta, whether that's Facebook, Instagram, or WhatsApp, at least once a month, how much information are they recording? The story today: what does Meta know about you?
My name's Matilda Davies. I'm a data journalist at The Times and the Sunday Times, and I focus on data analysis and using that for investigations.
So, Matilda, take me back to the start of this investigation. How did you come across it, and what made you look into Meta?
So, I'm one of the generation who grew up with the internet, so I've always been aware that my actions were being tracked online to a certain extent. I'm kind of in the know about targeted advertising and those sorts of things. But given it's now been 8 years since Cambridge Analytica, and this is such a huge year for democracy with the elections in the UK and the US, I was really interested to know what's changed in these last 8 years. So I thought, one of the easiest ways to do that was to see exactly what Meta was tracking about me. So I logged on one day in December last year and requested a download of all of the data it holds on me, which primarily came from the last 2 years, but parts of it stretched up to when I created my Facebook account when I was 11 years old.
To understand what you found out, we'll just take a step back. Let's go back to the start of your relationship with Meta, which, as you say, begins when you were 11. Tell us about that.
I created my Facebook account when I was 11 years old in December of 2007. You're not supposed to have a Facebook account when you're 11. The minimum age...
What's the legality here?
So the minimum age that Facebook allows users to create an account is 13. It has always been 13 and it is still 13. I put in my mother's birth year because all of my friends were on Facebook. I'd just started high school. A lot of us were using it to keep in touch with primary school friends and things like that. And in those early days of the internet, that didn't feel strange or dangerous. It was just where all your friends were connecting.
And where you put up all your pictures and share quite a lot about your life.
Yeah, exactly. While I was at high school, every birthday party was a Facebook event. Every conversation you had while you're at home was on Facebook Messenger. Every photo you took, you stored on Facebook.
And you shared quite a lot of your private life, with your single, what your hobbies are.
Yeah, absolutely. Particularly in that first 10 years of Facebook, when I think a lot of us weren't thinking about it so much. Every time you broke up with someone, you'd post it on Facebook and everyone would know. When people got married or had babies or anything like that. And Facebook knew all of it.
And back then, as you say, Facebook was this huge phenomenon. I mean, it's grown and grown since, but even back then, at school, everybody would be on it. It's how people were communicating. It was a huge success. And then 10 years later, it seemed to take a bit of a hit. Take us back to 2015 and just remind us of what happened.
So there was a company called Cambridge Analytica, which started taking people's personal data from about 2013. And it was doing all of this from Facebook and without the people's consent, the people whose data they were taking, to target political advertisements without people knowing about it.
Cambridge Analytica drilled deep, looking for a trove of social media data on Americans to help Republican presidential campaigns fine-tune their messages and win votes.
The primary issue with it was the firm was hired by Ted Cruz and Donald Trump for their 2016 election campaigns. And that was really where the most insidious targeting was happening. But then what happened was whistleblowers from inside Cambridge Analytica started coming forward. And in 2018, The Guardian and The New York Times broke this story from the inside, from these people who were saying, we've been involved and we think it's horrifying what they're doing, essentially.
If you can control all of the streams of information around your opponents, you can influence how they perceive that battle space, and you can then influence how they're going to behave and react.
The thing about that I think scared people about Cambridge Analytica was what they were doing is creating incredibly specific profiles about people. So if you're a 50-year-old man living in Middlesbrough who's divorced, who has voted Tory for the last 20 years and has 3 kids.
And likes real ale.
Yeah, exactly. These just hyper-targeted profiles. And based on that, they could target you advertisements that might play on your specific fears or your wants or the kind of person that you are. So that kind of advertisement can be really insidious and change people's behaviors in
very effective,
a way that's quite frightening.
Yeah. It was a big moment when that came to light. And yet despite that, since then, the company's only become bigger. Tell us about that.
A lot of things did change after Cambridge Analytica. Meta was fined a huge amount of money, apart from anything else. The company Cambridge Analytica was also fined a lot of money and no longer exists. And yeah, I think a lot of people were very shaken by the scandal and realizing the extent to which social media could affect global politics. But it didn't stop people using Meta platforms. I think people are also so reliant on these platforms. They play such a large part in so many of our lives that a lot of people weighed up the pros and cons and decided to stay.
But you thought things would change with Facebook. We should say they changed their name to Meta, presumably to try and detoxify it a bit, and became bigger and bigger.
Yeah, Facebook became Meta, and they bought Instagram, and they bought WhatsApp, and they've launched, VR and AI and all of this kind of stuff. So it's now kind of a global phenomenon. It's bigger than just Facebook, which is what it was at the time during Cambridge Analytica.
Let's focus on Meta. You decided to look at the data that the company has held on you. Just talk us through the process of how you managed to get it and what turned up.
So it's a legal right to be able to request your data from any company. Since GDPR, which is the UK's data protection law, governs the way in which companies can collect and process your data. And the privacy issues around Facebook, they have made it an option in your settings. So buried deep in your Facebook settings, there's an option to download all of your data. So yeah, that's what I did. And what I got back was 20,000 HTML files.
20,000?
20,000. Yeah, which contained everything from birthday party invitations to status updates to photos from when I was in high school, kind of everything that I was sharing since I was 11. But it also contained all of this information about what I'd been doing on websites that, in my mind, were not at all connected to Facebook, weren't connected to my Facebook account. But going through those files was such a gargantuan task. They give you a kind of homepage and a navigation system to look through it, but it's such a massive amount of data. In the end, it took me and my boss a full week. And
two data journalists, two
yeah,
people who deal with data all the time.
Yeah, it took 2 data journalists a full week and more than 70 lines of code to pull all these files together and put them into a spreadsheet that actually made sense to a layperson.
Matilda, you explained how you managed to get hold of all the data that Meta held on you. And after getting all this information, 20,000 odd files, I mean, just talk us through, what were the most shocking bits for a start? Which bits were you most surprised by?
So one of the main things I found shocking was just the absolute mundanities of my day-to-day life that it knew. During a 2-year period, my alarm clock app had sent data about me to Meta almost 7,000 times.
Wow. And this isn't an app owned by Meta?
No, it's, as I say, I hadn't even logged into the app. I don't have an account with the app. It's in no way linked to my Facebook account. One of the other things I found really disconcerting was my health data. Obviously, like many people, I use lots of websites and apps that relate to my health, like period trackers, and I use an app to book GP appointments and request prescriptions. And that's something that I considered to be very private information.
Yeah, I think everyone would.
But all of those apps and websites were sending all of my activity to Meta.
Wow. And even your banking app.
Yeah, finances was the other one that was really scary because, again, I think it's something that most people consider to be very private information. But I used 2 different banks. Both of them were telling Meta all of my activity on them, like gambling websites as well. I'm not a regular gambler, but the few times I had deposited money, made bets, taken money out,
They knew it.
Meta tracked all of it.
Wow. I mean, just stepping back, how can Meta collect all this information about people? How does that process happen? Does it mean somewhere along the line you've ticked a box saying consent or something? I mean, how are they able to do it?
So for people like me with a Facebook account or an Instagram account, when you sign up for Facebook, you agree to their privacy policy, which is a 30,000-word document.
I was going to say, very few people get to the end of.
Yeah, I don't think many people have read. So
What's there? What's in the small print? What have we missed? What are they allowed to take from your Facebook?
basically anything. Anything that you voluntarily put on Facebook, so your photos, your status updates, your friend requests, all of it, that is all owned by Meta, essentially, and you're giving that up voluntarily. But what you also sign up for is this third-party tracking, which is where they track you across all these different websites.
Just explain that process. How are they able to track you on other websites? Because, I know I've never ticked a box saying I consent for Meta to follow me on any other app, or I don't think I have.
If you have a Facebook account, you probably have.
I don't, but I am on Instagram and WhatsApp. Is that enough?
Okay, yeah, that's enough. So it'll generally be, when you sign up for the service, it'll be tiny writing next to a tick box that says, I consent to third-party tracking and cookies and whatever else is included.
I have to say, if I read that, I wouldn't even know what third-party tracking meant.
Well, yeah, and this is exactly the problem. So Meta needs consent to do it, but also the websites that you're visiting need consent to track you and share that data with Meta, which generally what that consent looks like is a pop-up that comes up at the bottom that says accept or reject the cookies. But again, most people don't know what that means. They just click accept blindly to make the pop-up go away.
I mean, you're in a hurry.
Yeah, exactly. And if you do go to kind of customize cookies, the whole thing is so complicated and there's so many options that almost no one bothers.
Yeah. So along the way, you've probably ticked something somewhere that allows them to it. Just talk us through the process of how it happens. So, for example, you mentioned some of your health apps or your banking app, that it doesn't seem related to Meta. Just explain the process of how every time you use it, how is Meta getting that information?
Basically, how Meta tracks you on the internet is through something called a metapixel, which is a few lines of code that any website can embed behind the website, which tracks users' activity on that website. As an example, so I bank with Monzo, so whenever I open the app, basically there's a little bit of code hidden behind that app that can see when I open the app, and it records that information and sends it to Meta. And in return, Meta explains to them what I've been doing on the app.
Explains to them what you've been doing on their own app.
Exactly.
What?
And
this seems bonkers.
It's easier for them to understand what's going on their app and who is going onto their app using Meta's interface, essentially. And Meta will give them kind of breakdowns of how many women use their app or how many people in different age brackets use their app. And that's obviously very useful for companies, and it saves them from having to build that infrastructure themselves. So, as I say, millions of companies use it.
That's amazing. We don't realise that the data isn't just going to the app we've signed on to, it's going to Meta at the same time.
Yeah, exactly. And, it's not just Meta. It's probably also going to Google, who offer tracking services as well, and a number of other companies.
And what do they do with them? I mean, it feels like it's this huge black hole that needs to be fed with lots of data, but what does it do with it when it gets it?
So Meta uses it for all kinds of reasons. Its primary use is it uses all of your browsing activity to put you into various audience groups. So whether that's someone who's interested in rock music, or someone that likes to treat themselves, or someone that shops at Sainsbury's. And then Facebook can sell those audiences to advertisers who think those people might be interested in their products. Meta's obviously worth an enormous amount of money, and most of its value comes from how much it knows about people.
And Meta collects all this data, and it's not just for themselves. I know you've spoken to some of the companies that use data collected by Meta. Tell us about that.
Meta crunches all this data to find out about different groups of people and the kind of actions they take online. And based on those groups of people, it can sell advertising to various companies that want to buy access to those groups of people.
So it can say, if you want to target women in their 30s who have a job, who like to visit wine bars in the evening, we can give you that set. We can give you a specific group who exactly match that criteria.
And it can combine your browsing data with your location data as well. So if it wants to target 25-year-olds who live in northwest London and regularly frequent bars, then you can advertise to that very small group of people.
Some people would argue that actually, Facebook or Meta may be holding all of this data on you, but it just helps them produce products that are better suited to you. The advertising you're seeing isn't going to be annoying adverts that couldn't mean less to you. You're not going to be seeing stuff about retirement homes at the age of 20. It'll be stuff that actually is relevant, that matters.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. It can be really useful. I've definitely found it in the past where I've been looking for that perfect pair of trainers that I haven't been able to find. And Meta has obviously realised that I'm looking for the perfect pair of trainers.
Sends you lots.
And it sends you lots. And sometimes that's how you find the perfect pair, which is great to a certain extent. But where it becomes a bit disconcerting is when it's advertising to you based on private information or information that you wouldn't necessarily want to have shared.
I mean, for people who are worried about their data and realise, this is all feels very invasive, what should you do? What should I be going and doing right now?
So, the first port of call with this is to go into your Facebook settings, and you can opt to turn off third-party tracking, which means that Meta is not allowed to track what you're doing across the internet. And you can also reject the cookies from them, so they can't store anything on your computer or on your phone that allows them to track you. So that should always be the number one thing that you do. But there's other things you can do to protect yourself as well. There are lots of browsers and search engines now that put privacy at the forefront of what they do. Mozilla Firefox is a really good browser to use, or Opera, and search engines like DuckDuckGo are much more protective of the data of the people that use them.
I think for a lot of people listening, I certainly thought this reading your piece. There's just a sense of shock that it should be happening now. It feels like over the last few years, with laws like GDPR rules coming in, there's been such a move towards protecting privacy that I can't quite believe in the modern world. It feels like companies like Meta can see more of me than anybody's been able to do before.
It is really concerning. And there are lots of brilliant privacy organizations and charities that are doing lots of work in this area. But one of the issues is that charities and organizations that might want to take on Meta, it's very difficult to do because Meta has almost unlimited resources at this point.
Yeah.
But the ICO in the UK, which enforces our data protection laws, is doing a lot of work in this area to make sure that people understand when they're clicking accept cookies exactly what they're giving away, and making sure websites are being honest about what they're doing with people's data and giving people a genuine choice of whether to hand that over or not.
What have they said about your investigation?
So Meta, they did assure me that their policies require advertisers to have explicit consent to be processing the data that they are. And it says its system is designed to filter out potentially sensitive data, and it does try and educate the people advertising on its service to make sure they understand the law.
And Matilda, for you, having done this investigation, having got 20,000 files on what's been held on you, standing back, what does it make you think about this world? Because this is the world we all inhabit now.
I was really shocked when I got back my data. As I say, I really thought that this was something I was clued up about, having used the platform for such a long time, but I still had no idea of the real extent of how much of my data Meta could get a hold of.
Has it changed the way you use the internet at all?
It has definitely changed the way I use the internet. When I got to the end of this investigation, I went onto Facebook, I removed all of my permissions. I now always reject the permissions when I'm browsing the internet. Because what I didn't realize, and I think a lot of people don't realize, is you don't lose any functionality of the website if you reject the cookies. I'm definitely more careful about my browsing online. I use plugins to protect my privacy, all of this kind of thing, because I don't trust the way that they use our data anymore.
That's Matilda Davies, and this episode captures a snippet of her full investigation, which you can now read online at thetimes.co.uk with a subscription. The producer today was Priyanka Deladia, the executive producer is Kate Ford, and sound design and theme tune by Maula Seto. You may have noticed Stories of Our Times is now The Story. We'll still be bringing you one in-depth dive into the news each day, and I'll be out and about more with original reporting and investigations. We also have a new email, so do let us know what you think of it all and what you'd like to hear on the podcast at thestory@thetimes.co.uk. Thanks for listening. See you again soon.